IVM.
Hey, it's been a great week on IVM Podcast. If you're not following us on social media, please make sure you are. We are IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. This week on Keeping It Queer, Naveen talks to prominent author Devdutt Patnaik to explore queerness as depicted in Indian mythology. On Cyrus Says, Cyrus meets the film critic and writer Raja Sen, and the duo quickly descend into a whirlwind of movie references. On LBB, catch a fun event in Delhi happening soon and a contest lined up for you on the LBB I Found Awesome podcast. On Hustle Science, hosts Ranveer and Tejaswin talk to entrepreneur Pranav Marwa from Thinkubate about his journey. Also, if you missed last week, make sure you catch Sahil Qatar on their first episode. That was a great show. On Paisa Vaisa, if you missed last week's episode, we had a fun back-to-school special episode with a bunch of really smart 10-year-olds who asked Anupam questions about inflation, taxes, and more. Try and listen to as many of these shows as you can. And now, on to your show.
Hey, welcome to Shunya One, episode 58. Today we are talking to Anuj from TTT, and it's been a longish discussion around terribly tiny tales. But before we get into that, of course, it's been a fun week. We had Manisha on last week's episode.
Yeah.
We also ran a poll on our Slack channel. So finally, we had a few folks speaking up to which has been an otherwise very quiet channel.
It's been a little quieter than we'd like. But in the episode of Manisha with Manisha last week, we spoke a little bit about the idea of whether startups should build their own tech or if they should start looking for tech from other places, use open source tools, use other tools, that kind of stuff. So the question we asked was, should startups build their own tech from scratch? Answer A was outsourcing tools can make life easier. Answer B was rebuild so it's efficient and reliable. And answer C was differs from case to case. The clear winner was answer C, where everybody felt that it was something that we should decide on a case-to-case basis, whether or not you should build extra tech. We got a couple of comments as well around that. So Kiran Jonal Gada said that, in my opinion, anything customer-facing should be fully under control as it shapes the customer's experience of your startup's offerings. The need for control usually means it has to be built and maintained in-house. Everything else should be outsourced. So I guess he agrees with depends on
Kiran's from Hasgeek.
Yeah, he is. We had Zainab on a while ago. Yeah. And your buddy Kuldeep also said, on the other hand, building tools in-house can quickly spiral out of control. Startups are about focus and doing more with less. So that sounds kind of like Kuldeep.
Absolutely. I think he was trying to sell there. But we'll come back to that.
Yes.
But just like this, I think what we're going to do is try and seed a few more of these polls and ideas.
We'll put a poll out every Wednesday, and we're in the process of scheduling an AMA with Soeb Grewal. We should get that going next week as well, so that everybody can participate on that too.
Yep. It's always good to have our past guests come and chime in and talk back with the community. Yep. So look forward to that. But onwards with our show today. Hey, today we have with us Anuj Gosalia, the co-founder and CEO of Terribly Tiny Tales, TTT. Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you so much. I am thrilled to be here.
Yes, finally, it's good to have you. I think we've been friends for a while. Of course, TTT has been around for a while. You guys have a great story, which I want to get into. And of course, I know how you met your co-founder, Chintan, which I definitely also want to hear about. So you guys are in a very unique, I would say, business. And now you're also in tech because you have your own platform.
Correct.
But before that, maybe just to set some context, why don't we hear your story and how TTT came to be after doing a few different things?
Yes. I'm going to keep true to tradition, terribly tiny, most of these introductory pieces. And then as this evolves, maybe we can ask more questions. But so, yeah, I always loved writing. Ever since I was a kid, I loved reading and writing both. And those are the only two things. I mean, reading, there were no marks for reading, but for writing in literature and there was in ICSE, there was two sort of English papers. And so I would relatively always do better at those. But so I always had, and there was a lot of joy in this world of words and creativity. But as I grew older, of course, like many people in our country, those aspirations withered away, and because also there was nothing in the family to indicate that there was like a commercial or a vocation, possible with words. So yeah, I went down the traditional route of studying commerce and doing my B school and worked at a startup called What's on India, which was funded by sort of Nexus and Sequoia. And that was also my introduction to like this grueling world of startups where, I was signed up to do business development, but I was pretty much doing many other things that were not part of my KRA. And so I that was addictive. At the same time, what we were building was something that I hadn't great perspective on. It was early days. They were also learning and pivoting. So I was right when they were trying to find, like, as we now call product market fit. But but the experience was great. To learn from people who were in it full time was amazing. After that, I went to B school, and then that's when I come from a family that does not have a sort of a business background. We did back in the day, but my father works at a technical textile company, and so there was always this phobia of starting out. It was always romantic in the head, like, yeah, startups are cool, and back in 2009-10 they were pretty cool. And so I was always anxious to start out, and so I went to this obscure business school called the Entrepreneurship Development Institute of India.
Wow, that's very specific.
Many people don't even know it exists. It's in Ahmedabad, and it's I hope that it would train you to become an entrepreneur.
Hold on.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is that not everybody needs to be an IIM or IIT graduate? Is that what you're trying to say here?
Well, my story indicates that that's a possibility. But this interesting place, but of course it didn't turn out to be exactly as I had hoped, because that place just had like a flurry of folks from family businesses. So there were all these loaded mofos. And I was like, damn, none of these guys are going to start up. They're going to chill for 2 years and end up going back to their family businesses. And I am definitely not getting a job after studying at Entrepreneurship Development Institute of India. So by the end of the second year, I was like, shit, dude, नौकरी तो नहीं मिलने वाली, कुछ करना पड़ेगा.
So, well, at least the objective worked, I think that's what they were trying to drill into you.
Yeah, I think that's the purpose of the school. It's like it ensures no one can employ you. And so I was struggling to figure what to do next. And so the big learning there, though, was from all these guys with family businesses. What I really took away was this idea that, like, especially coming from sort of a middle classish home where money is always, where you're very judicious about earning and spending, this idea around salary was debunked. Like when, we would talk about like these IIM graduates make like 2 lakh a month, and they would just laugh, and they would be like, that's like the kind of money you'd make in a day or half a day. And I was like, dude, like, these guys are not even like, purely from an IQ perspective, maybe not the smartest kids, but they were just so fearless. And I think that was my big takeaway. I was like, it's maybe not so hard as it is in my head. So I started something called Bechain Nagri. And just to make it very, very clear, it wasn't a porn site. Although some of my cousins did call me up and say, hey, you're pursuing your childhood passion finally. And I was like, no, guys, this is like a coming together of a lot of amazing designers. So I met someone at the National Institute of Design, NID, and she's a phenomenal designer. And just out of instinct, we were like, okay, you guys have like this amazing artwork in your sketchbooks, completely unused. What are you doing with it? And I was like, I can figure resources, get printing done, books made, and we'll use this artwork because it's going nowhere. And there were like 15, 20 designers with amazing work. So we put all that work together, cleaned it up a bit, packaged it, called it Bechain Nagri, and started retailing it. So that was like my first introduction to startup land. I'm going to quickly jump to, how TTT started. So that Bechain Nagri piece, of course, didn't work out too well. We spent about 1.5 years doing it, after which I realized that startups are not just about the idea. It's about A, commitment to the idea, B, the quality of execution, 3, product market. There's just so many things
yeah.
besides this whole like, whoa, I want to like make the next big thing. So I went back to doing what I really liked, which was go back to writing, because I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't want to take up a job just because I need to make some money. So I started freelancing to make some money on the side. And purely out of a private passion, I started Terribly Tiny Tales as a Facebook page. This was in March of 2013. I was solving my own problems, which is I sadly lost the attention span to finish books.
Mm-hmm.
I would love reading. I couldn't finish books. And each time I wrote a long piece, I would get 7 likes. Each time I wrote something really short, it would get 17 or 27. I was like, okay, this very crude A/B test has some
Wow, so this was not a deliberate idea.
It wasn't. It wasn't like I thought out and saw the industry and said, oh, maybe there is like this need gap for short fiction.
Yeah, you
nothing.
didn't make a 3-page PPT.
Nothing.
Okay.
It was,
I thought this was kind of like there were. I thought this was based on that Hemingway short story, that really famous one, the baby shoes unsold, unworn.
For sale, baby shoes never worn.
Never worn, right? Yeah, I thought it was kind of like from that you kind of jumped off that, but you're saying that this just kind of organically developed.
Yeah, I mean, I did at this point when I started Terribly Tiny Tales, I did stumble upon shorter fiction, microfiction that inspired me to write in that format.
Mm-hmm.
But it was again never designed to sort of be a startup in that sense.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So that's how TDD came to be. And of course, interestingly, you met your co-founder now, Chintan, also after that, right?
Yes.
After you guys started this up.
Yes. So Chintan and I've been a big fan of, so he worked in advertising back in 2013. He had quit advertising, but I was a big fan of his advertising work. He was a phenomenal writer, worked at Ogilvy and Taproot and Creative Land Asia. And so I had written to him like a fan mail when he was in advertising.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we connected on Facebook. We sort of, got to know each other a bit online. But after he quit, he was traveling all over the country. He didn't know what to do next. He didn't want to just join another agency, although he had many offers, including one from Google to join as sort of brand manager for India. But he was taking his time. He's traveling the country. So on one of his trips, he invited me to come with him to Leh. So we took like this 2-week trip to Ladakh, which was amazing because we spoke about nothing work. It was just about like, his love for poetry and, ideas that I had about what TTT could become and his feedback on it.
Mm-hmm.
And once he got back to Bombay is when we
forged this new team and
we came together and figured that this might be something bigger than just a Facebook page. It could evolve into a community and now a platform.
That's amazing. But of course, now that you guys have a platform, you've forayed into the tech world by building your own app, and you've just launched it. What in these formative years of you starting a Facebook page and suddenly getting a lot of audience, and then you and Chintan obviously figuring out how this could be a business, like what was that insight which you understood that obviously people love this new format that you've created, and you said that it sort of existed in some other forms, micro novels and micro poetry, but how did it transform into such an addictive tool or addictive methodology for all your your user base, and how do you make it a business? I mean, do you think this is a whole new form of content you've sort of evolved, and now obviously you're working with brands and you're working with other people? Like, could you tell us about the business side of TTT a little bit?
Absolutely. So when we started putting out these stories, what we realized, we stumbled upon this attention deficit millennial community, which included us, to be honest. And we figured that there were just way too many people who would not mind interesting stories. So there were memes and selfies and cat gifs and all of those things happening, of course, and the good morning WhatsApp messages.
Right.
So clearly in some different formats, this mobile consumption of content, which is snappy, short, takes less than like 3 minutes was happening already. It's just that we found this small subset, which is now much larger, but that you would also care for something meaningful or something entertaining or delightful or moving in those 3 minutes. So it didn't necessarily have to be something whimsical or ridiculous. It could also be this format. And so as the community grew, we were 15 of us when we started, 15 writers, including Chintan and myself. So these were people from advertising, journalism, all prolific writers, but not published in that sense. So they were not authors, but they were very good at the craft. So we started doling out one story every day, and that became like a thing, and people started looking forward to these stories. At one point, I think a year later, this was 2014, we realized that there were just too many people who wanted to write. They were like, please take our submissions, and some of the writers were really good, and we were like, dude, why are we like just 15 of us controlling this when clearly there's, from a creation point of view, there's so much demand. So then we said, okay, let's open the floodgates, let us not be the only 15 writers, let us make it a crowdsourcing model. So our first evolution without any technology coming into the picture was just create like a Google form with submit.
Okay.
Like you put crude Google form where people could submit stories, and that just, wow, man. So from one story a day, we were getting 400, 500 submissions every day.
Wow.
From across the world. And so suddenly we were now like, shit, this is just changes the game, because from co-writers and sort of like a sweet family of writers, we suddenly now have like 500 writers.
And this is submissions, but you were already getting a lot of readers.
Readers was happening organically through sort of Facebook content viraling, and so we had about 2-3 lakh readers around then across Facebook and Instagram.
Right. So just going back a little bit to the creation,
Sure.
what kind of challenges did you come up with, right? I mean, like when moving from a content which you are creating yourself to a crowdsourced platform, I mean, like that's got to change how you're doing things really, really effectively, right? Quality control becomes a much more important aspect than what it would be if you got 15 people who have a certain quality of writing, as opposed to the entire world where you're going to have uneven stuff, right?
Yeah.
So how did you deal with that? I mean, like what kind of challenges did that bring to you?
I mean, those are hard. They continue to remain hard times from a curation perspective,
Right.
because some of the stuff is so bad. It's just so bad. So like 99 out of 100 stories that we.
But you have to read them all.
We have, someone has to read them all, and so those were really dark times.
Okay.
They continue to be in some small measure, but I mean, there's a way to look at it. One is, if you're a publisher, that's like pain, because you have to read so many submissions that you feel aren't up to a certain sort of level or that you want to sort of represent.
Well, your platform has a quality which you want to maintain.
Exactly.
Right?
So then we built, again, iterated on solutions. So first we read everything. We realized very inefficient, takes like, all day. So we expanded our internal team, and got like 3-4 people doing this, and we realized still not a great idea. That's when Anshuman, who's the CTO now, and that's how we got introduced. He found some bugs on our website, wrote to me. Because I made a WordPress, hack, like a crappy, scrappy website, and it was obviously not like, well done. So he found some loopholes, wrote to me saying there's some shit on your website. I can help you fix it. I was like, whoa, help, please do. And he was based out of London then, and he was working at IBM. But he was kind enough to help. And so we got talking, and then the first shift we made was we built something called a community curator app with him. So this was an app which is Tinder-like, which we gave out to 100 people within our community. So we picked out these readers who were a lot like us. So we gave them like 100 tales to curate, and based on their score on the test and their deviation score, we would and some qualitative answers, we would give them like this community curator app.
Interesting.
So every day now there were 100 people across the world reading these 500 stories. Every tale got rated by 10 people, and we would get sort of a cumulative score.
Right.
which would come to our team then. And so then we would like say, okay, read 50 stories a day, which were like 3.5 and upwards.
Right.
Which made life much easier. And yeah, so that's how we were able to answer your question, address this volume problem for a pretty long time.
It's awesome. And also, all this while, another point I wanted to also ask about was the fact that you guys have been bootstrapped, right? From day one, you've been self-funded business, and you're making money now.
Yes.
So how did that come about? Because what made you realize that, this is the way I want to monetize? And what were the other bootstrapping hacks you
Actually,
guys
how
used?
do you monetize?
Yeah, so
I think that's the...
so to answer both questions, one is when you're building a community, obviously, even when you have your own platform, as we are well aware, you can't monetize when you've got like 50,000 users or 10,000 users. You need like that critical mass.
Mm-hmm.
So we knew that on Facebook or Instagram, we had to get to like at least 500,000 people or 1 million people before we could even go to a brand or become the influencer brand. We had to reach some mass. So until then, we were running. Chintan again had great sort of advertising experience. I could, figure ways to sell or package. So we ran something called Not Like That, which was like a design/advertising agency.
Mm-hmm.
So that would, for the first 2 years, pay the bills.
Okay.
And so we were doing TTT stuff post 6 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
And until then, we were making like TV ads and print ads for Girnar Tea and Hamleys and Reliance. We were doing like social media posts for them. So we did some really, although I must say it was really painful work, but we still managed to do a decent job from a creative standpoint. But yeah, I mean, that was something we had to do for, almost 2 years till we reached a place where TTT started monetizing, which is when a brand like Cornetto came in.
Mm-hmm.
Although the first brand that did come in was Amnesty International. So on the 30th anniversary of the Bhopal gas tragedy, they said, we want to like talk about this. And you guys tell amazing stories. Can you tell this story? And we were like, wow, we would love to. And so we co-branded this. Of course, we didn't charge money, but we realized that this was a model.
Yeah.
Where we had the skill to tell stories. We also, because of advertising experience, we could also funnel these story messages, keeping the brand in mind.
Right.
And so that opened up this massive universe where we could now go to every brand and say, hey, you do your product ad on TV, but do your emotional storytelling on TTT.
Yeah. So native advertising on your...
Exactly. It costs little money. It allows you to build more sort of loyal engagement with the community because you're not selling.
Right.
It's stories. So, and we will not deviate from your core message. So when we partner with Cornetto, we talk about young love. And so we do young love stories and we talk about love of every kind. It still is under the larger brand umbrella, but it still doesn't deviate from their core message.
Right.
So that was Cornetto. With Benetton, they talk about these large human truths, about no hate, no racism. Again, this is so fertile for stories. So that unlocked.
That's interesting. So when you are, let's say you're working with a brand of some sort, right, and they want stories. So these would be stories that you guys would create internally, or would you open this out to your crowdsourcing minions? I guess minions is not the right word, but...
Oh no, man! They are our users.
Your users, your community. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No. So this is a harder skill. So it depends really on two things. One is the volume. Like for example, Cornetto does 100 tales with us every year. So it makes sense to open it to a community where there are like 12,000 submissions for 100 stories.
Right.
The probability of you getting published is much higher. But if a brand wants to do 5, 7,
right,
and if their messaging is really funneled,
then you want to kind of control that
then
yourself.
we will get it done. So
yeah. Makes sense.
Internally.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Awesome. And obviously, you apart from your app, you guys have also launched a book, and I think you're on the second one.
Yes.
So you went to non-digital dead tree formats as well.
We did, yeah.
Was that like more from a community need point of view? Like were people really clamoring for it? Because I know, like obviously reading communities have a love for, reading real books as well.
Yeah, so we also do workshops in colleges across the country. I'll talk very quickly about it. But yeah, I mean, as the community grew, a lot of colleges came to us saying, okay, this is an interesting new format of storytelling that, our faculty doesn't even know of.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be nice for you guys to talk about it. And so we realized that, wow, there is this opportunity to build offline community, which makes the digital community far stronger and makes it more loyal, more engaged. And at the same time, we could monetize that model completely. Right. So we could charge workshop fees and sort of training fees. But so at the end of every workshop, there's a form in which we'd ask, what do you want most as part of the community? And we'd have book, app, short films, web series, and a bunch of things.
Wow.
And the book would, more than the
not
app...
Podcast?
Not podcast.
Not podcast.
Not yet.
Not yet.
But the book would always trump everything else. And so one was that direct community feedback saying, I mean, you might think of yourselves as like digital storytelling startup and all of that, but we want that goddamn book. And so one is that. Second is, it's strange, but in the family, for a lot of people, the book
makes sense.
The book is the only thing they know we do.
Yeah.
So I was like, after all these years, this.
Kitab likha hai.
Kitab likha hai. So, but mostly we've done it from a sort of community building standpoint. From a revenue perspective, it doesn't.
Awesome, man. I think this is great insight into what TTT has been and of course is evolving into. We're going to take a quick break, come back and talk some more with Anuj.
Why don't we talk about mental illness? For that matter, we don't even talk about emotional wellness. And if we can't talk about either of these very basic aspects of being human, what do we do when we just feel like something's not right?
Hi, I'm Zain.
And I'm Avanti.
And this is Marbles Lost and Found, a show where we invite conversations about mental health and illness and just get people to talk about it, because it's okay to do so. Catch Marbles Lost and Found every Tuesday on the IVM app, website, or anywhere you get your podcasts from.
Hey, welcome back. So talking to Anuj here about TTT, although our conversation hasn't been tiny at all and definitely not terrible. It's been awesome. So
we'll let the listeners decide.
Yes. But coming back to, of course, now the fact that you have this very engaged community, you've found a sort of new format of, publishing in a world where, like you said, cat gifs exist, and obviously there's Instagram and there's Instagram stories, and then there's so much vying for people's attention.
Correct.
And yet you are, while starting with this to nurture your community, you're going and also going on these other formats, right? And of course, like you said, you started Facebook as a Facebook page, got some great following there. You're on Instagram, have great followers there. How do these such massive distribution platforms, where you start maybe, or where you gather your millions of followers, how do you think as a business now, are you constrained by them, or are you still using them as a source of in early interest and then move eventually people to your own platform? Like, what's your overall sense of this for especially content creators, right? Because YouTube has been around, yet people, continue to monetize on it. There's a lot of conflict around, YouTube and how much the platform owns.
Correct.
Then we do podcasts here. Obviously, podcasts have massive distribution across all platforms, but you have no control on those platforms.
Yeah.
So what's it for you? I mean, when it's just literally just writing, right? So how do you see this, and what's your challenge been or your experience been?
I think we built our communities. So also these platforms, when we started these platforms from at least an algorithm perspective, I think they've evolved considerably. When we started, I think most pages, or as we're called on these platforms, which are non sort of individual accounts, the content would reach a lot more people when we started. So like, if I had a community of 1,000 people, if I posted something, it would reach in the early days, even 200, 250 people. So 25% of the community, which is staggering. Compared to now, where it can be as low as 0.25, 0.5%.
What?
So we have over 120,000 followers on Facebook. I regularly see posts with seen by 15 people, seen by 17 people.
There, see.
So
purely from a distribution standpoint, these platforms have evolved, and for their own interest and their community's interest, they've made tweaks to the algorithm that preserve the sort of engagement of their users, where there's collateral damage to content creators like us who started or built early community there.
And of course, monetization for them, right? So everything is a paid view after that. Right?
Exactly. And so their interest also is at some point to convert platforms or content creators in their case, like us, to pay money and to sort of, promote the posts. Yeah. Although, having said that, we still enjoy disproportionately sort of large engagement because our content, as we've grown, has evolved. And, we started off as a very purist microfiction community. We did, we would spend hours, refining one tale to make it subtle, and great microfiction is really about what you don't say. And so when you read something like For Sale, Baby Shoes Never Worn, if you look at it, that story is about the loss of a child, and you talk about what would the parents think. There's so much unsaid there in 6 words. From there, we've evolved into, we still try and preserve some of that purity, but we've also evolved into telling stories which are easy to read. We've got a format called Pop, TTT Pop, which is really simple stories where you read and you'll be like, yeah, happens in my life. Super relatable, super snappy. That gets us more engagement. We've evolved formats like chat fiction, so that's become really popular.
Yeah.
Also, it allows us to be more natural. Because it's a phone conversation, and so we don't have to be caught up in grammar theek nahi hai. and yet the engagement comes through. So
awesome. And of course now you've, like I said, you've branched into even making your short films. You've branched into all other formats. Of course, we spoke about the book, and all of this is to again feed into the same community story.
It is. I mean, so what we're doing now that our tech plays out for the world, what we're trying really to do is to look at all these communities on other platforms as almost like sampling communities. So when each time we come out with a new format, it's almost like we've got 1 million people, 2 million people to sample something.
Right.
And so all our beta testing in that sense happens with a really large community, but we still get to learn a lot without investing in, say, for example, chat fiction. To build out chat fiction from a software point of view is engineering effort. It takes time, effort. And you want to know whether that feature from a content consumption point of view works, doesn't work. Wow. It's easier to create it on, Premiere Pro and get a video editor to make one and sample it with the community, learn from there, and then port it back into the app. So that's the goal, to take these sticky formats, figure ways in which they can be UGC friendly. So if I had to get you to write chat fiction, how would that be? We'd make it really simple on the app for you, give you tools, tips, and then let you create. But we would hopefully know that this is a popular or an exciting
that people
format.
Want to do this.
Yes.
Can you describe chat fiction a little more?
Oh, it's awesome.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So chat fiction is really if Shiladitya and I were talking on WhatsApp,
right,
chances are our conversation would be very functional. But if I had to put my writer hat on, I could take it to a completely different place. Okay. And so you completely fictionalize a chat, and usually thrillers are amazing. So when think of a situation where I'm at home alone and I'm maybe there's no electricity, I'm in a smaller town, and I'm on 1% battery, and there's someone knocking at the door who I'm not sure who it is, and I want to get in touch with my sister or parent, and 1% battery. So what happens in that chat?
Oh, okay. So okay, I got it.
It's like situational chats.
No, but
right?
so it's basically the screenshots of the different chat things that you see, which are telling a story.
But it plays like a video.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, and also things which you don't say. I love the the stories where you're typing something and then you erase it.
Backspace it.
Yeah, those are epic. I mean, we all have had that.
Yeah,
We've had so many things we type and then don't send.
Yeah, I see that a lot. I see
Yeah.
that on our group chat a lot. You've been typing stuff and then nothing comes through.
Well, yes.
So Shiladitya typing and it was like backspace.
But there you go, a whole new format.
But yeah, we will show you the backspacing. And so you're like, this is what he was thinking.
That's exactly. So see, again, whole new dimension, whole new format. Again, all over text. We talk about how, for us here as a podcast also, it's a medium which is very constrained with itself, right? Because it's audio.
Right.
And a lot of people say, why don't you shoot a video of the podcast? At the same time, so you have actually branched into storytelling. So I think what you're overall, you're still a storytelling platform, right?
It is.
TTDB, the text is just one medium for it.
Is one medium. So we want to eventually obviously be medium agnostic. Text allows us to, in this world of YouTube, Instagram, and so many other very, very dominant video platforms, in some small measure allows us to stand out. Of course, it creates...
It has its own challenges.
It has its own limitations because it's text. But it still really helps us to build more engaged community there. Also, we think because our tech is evolving, we feel like text is easier to control in that sense.
Right.
From a machine learning perspective, from a sort of bandwidth perspective, so many things, as of now, it's easier for us to control. And having said that, we're like, our one line is we're enabling stories that move people. So, I mean, that's, every decision is funneled through that one line, which is now stories could be text today, audio tomorrow, video going forward. So
awesome. And also now, since you have such an engaged community, what kind of stories do you see, like, more and more, right? As a storytelling medium, as a storytelling platform, you also have this sort of responsibility to tell the right stories, do you think, right?
Yeah.
Like the Amnesty example you gave obviously became a project with a brand, but we see so many people today using all of these mediums of distribution and social media to tell their own personal stories, right? We've had folks here who, like we spoke about Share Chat earlier, right? Again, another medium reaching a whole different community, which doesn't reach the 1%ers, but there people use that as a means of expression. So what do you see? Like what stood out in all the things which your platform has helped? People I know go through like depression and they have this as a means of, reaching out to others in some certain format. Do you think, has something stood out? Have you found as a writer meaning in this community you've built?
Yeah, I think what you spoke of has been, I think if we see the app well, I think that's a massive global use case, we feel. Like what Instagram really is doing, and we get to know because we're text based, is it's built this entire large, massive community of people who are constantly aspiring to project, right?
Yeah,
like they're aspiring to project a certain kind of life, and there's all these demands on how you look because it's so visual and everyone's so crafted on Instagram. So we see a lot of content that is almost anti-Instagram, which is, I'm going through anxiety because my friends are influencers and I want more followers, but I don't look as good. And then there are people struggling with anxiety, depression, and this, I kid you not, but it's reached, if our data tells us, it could be epidemic proportions, like within the target audience we cater to, which is 18 to 24 in metro cities. It's monstrous. The amount of things unsaid within like people, because again, there is this whole, this peer pressure to be a certain kind today. So we see a lot of those stories, like an outpouring, like a catharsis. So, of course, while we do a lot of humor and thrillers and entertaining stories, a lot of the UGC is about relationships, about dealing with heartbreak, about dealing with depression, about relationships with parents, friends. Those are big things affecting, the stories and the conversations. So I feel like we could become this
enabler of
these stories, which would again bring loyal sort of users to it across the world.
Do you have like any red lines? Like, I mean, like we won't cross this line in terms of like, it's UGC stories, right? So there's stuff that probably comes in which are like, don't want this on the platform, right? So I mean, like what kind of, what kind of content
even that's a responsibility, right? Just like, I actually didn't touch upon this, but a comparable platform is actually Twitter, right? Twitter has been the bugbear of, so many problems at the same time, so much in the world, right? Again, text only, of course, now they're everything. But do you see that responsibility of like what Amit just said, to, sort of be the curator or rather the censor?
Yeah, I guess censor. Yeah, see, I didn't want to use the word censor. I couldn't figure out what else, right? I mean, like, because it really is that, right? I mean, like, you do have the responsibility. You don't want hateful stuff on there. You don't want misogynistic stuff on there. So, I mean, like, what are the kinds of lines that you draw given the audiences that we have?
I'm glad, Amit, you asked this question because that's something we talk about a lot internally. Also, because we're a hybrid in that sense, where we're also sort of our editorial team is actively assuming responsibility of taking a stance and saying, okay, we represent a certain kind of content. So, I mean, when we were a submissions-based model, it was easy where we could see something misogynistic and we would say, okay, this doesn't go. Or if there was something pornographic and not erotic, but just like really explicit in a bad way, we could throw it out. But now, early days still, with our tech platform, so far, we've got sort of engaged, loyal users who are doing mostly the right things.
Right.
We still have, of course, from a tech point of view, we've got all these, back-end sort of algorithms and softwares in place to help us weed out some of these words purely and get it back to our community team. So if someone's written these words, it will flag up. And we're also hoping our community, we've built these tools to report and clean up community. And we've got our community guidelines as well. So like politics is something, we've had a lot of backlash back in the day. We've taken stances on the JNU issue.
Okay.
We've spoken for on Kashmir, but from a very Kashmiri person, very deeply personal accounts, which have gotten hate. So we've faced that. And so back in the day, we were unprepared. We didn't know enough. So we had to, in some cases, we got reported so many times our page was under threat. But we know where to draw the line where, again, we don't want to be like Twitter. So we think of ourselves more as like Medium, but more fiction friendly.
Right. You're not a social network one-to-one.
You're not open, right? I mean,
we're open, but we're, again, what we want to be is more deeply personal narratives or fiction stories. So we're not information for sure. We don't want to be journalistic. We don't want to. We want to completely steer away from places where Twitter and Medium both are very good at.
Right.
So
awesome. Wow. So obviously you guys are onto a new platform, and of course the app is out.
Yep.
People should download it, check it out, post some interesting stuff. I still have to write my bio because you've said keep it as short as possible and
keep it very you
and very me. So I'm going to check it out. But apart from that, where do people reach you and TTD in general? What's your Twitter handle and
Yeah, so firstly, check out the app. It's on terriblytinytales.com/app. You can download it for iOS, Android. Personally, you can reach me at anuj@terriblytinytales.com if you have any specific questions to me. Otherwise, I'm on all networks, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You can look up Anuj Gosalia everywhere and you'll find me.
Awesome. Thanks so much for doing this, Anuj. I mean, this was really fun. Of course, before we go, Amit.
I would like to remind everybody, as I always do, please join the Slack channel. Go to the website, ivmpodcast.com/Shunya One. Over there's a button, say, I want to join the Slack channel. Click that button, send us your email, and we'll send you an invitation back. Also, please do send us a review, or rather write us a review or give us a rating on wherever you're listening to this podcast. That kind of stuff really helps. And that's it.
Awesome. So look forward to folks telling their terribly tiny tales.
Thank you so much, you guys. Thank you, Sheila. Thank you, Amit. It was a pleasure. And we will shout out to the IVM folks.
That'd be good.
And yes, please do. I mean, podcasts are amazing, and
See, this is what I need. This is what I need. I need people like this.
Absolutely recommend you check the other amazing 23 active podcasts on the network.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks so much for doing this, Anuj. It was great having you.
He bends down to test the warm water for his bath. He comes here to quench his thirst for a hot shower and some podcasts. You can witness how he enjoys having other people talk about cool stuff in his bathroom. Indeed, it helps him with his loneliness. You can find more of his species on ivmpodcast.com, your one-stop destination where you can check out the coolest Indian podcasts. Happy listening.